In this episode, I'm going to be interviewing Jonathan Hertzberg, who started the boutique label called Fun City Editions. We are going to be discussing Born to Win, which they recently restored and released on Blu-ray. Born to Win was released in 1971, and it was directed by Ivan Passer. It was written by David Scott Milton. He also co-wrote it with the director Ivan Passer, and it starred George Segal, Paula Prentiss, Karen Black, Jay Fletcher, Hector Elizondo, and Robert De Niro. It's got a wonderful cast, so stick around. Welcome to Robert Bellissimo at the Movies. This is a YouTube video podcast where we explore storytelling on film, as well as interviews with industry professionals who work in film, television, and theater. I want to welcome to the show Jonathan Hertzberg, who is the founder of the boutique repertory film label Fun City Editions. Jonathan, welcome. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me, Robert.
I just want to say off the bat, on behalf of all the Born to Win, fans, because I've been a fan of this for almost 20 years, and I've been waiting for a restoration. So thank you so much. I was actually in April, late April, I had COVID, and I was kind of like half asleep on my bed with, a bit on the fatigue side. And I saw here in Toronto, Bay Street Video where they announced that they were selling it. And I immediately picked up the phone, even though I was like, half conscious, and ordered one over to my house. But this is incredible, and I've loved this film suite for years. So thank you for doing this.
So you're saying that Born to Win was a movie that kind of actually brought you back to health, because it's certainly not what we're seeing on screen there. They're not afflicted with COVID per se, but we're not talking about the healthiest bunch of people.
It doesn't quite add up, but I guess on a creative level, it brought my energy back somewhat. So no, this is terrific. But before we jump more into that, I was curious, could you tell us a little bit about what Fun City Editions is all about?
Sure. Yeah. So Fun City, first of all, Fun City Editions, the name is actually very connected to the movie we're talking about, Born to Win, because Fun City was the sort of ironic nickname given to New York in the 60s and 70s and into the early 80s for that it was that time period when New York was pretty down and out and literally bankrupt at one point. So Fun City. So we're sort of we're paying tribute to that because we happen to love or have a lifelong obsession with New York on film. Yeah. So especially in that time period, and because I grew up outside of the city, and I just always have had a fascination with it. And anyway, Born to Win is a quintessential Fun City movie, movie made at that time when New York was Fun City. So it just felt, so when we have one of those, it feels very appropriate because of the name of the company. But
that was the mayor coined it that, right? At the time, he coined it Fun City, I believe.
Well, indirectly, it was not intentional. The mayor was John Lindsay was the mayor, and it was right at the beginning of his term, and the city was in the middle of a transit strike, and so people weren't really in a great mood, obviously, overall, because the city kind of comes to a halt. Everything comes to a halt. We're so dependent on public transit here. And he said, well, I still think it's a fun city. I'm riding my bike around everywhere, so the tabloids kind of, made him eat that, basically. And,
right. I see.
Yeah. So it kind of became, it was kind of thrown back in his face. But then you did start to see a lot of businesses at that time in the city used Fun City over, and you sometimes see it in movies. You'll see signage of like businesses at the time that used Fun City as a name, and it kind of became less known as the 80s and 90s and we in the last 20, 30 years or whatever, it became sort of more forgotten. And we kind of I had actually created a video essay series about 10 years ago called Dirty Old New York, aka Fun City, which was more of what I was just talking about before, sort of compiling clips from hundreds of movies that were set in New York or filmed in New York at that time. So the name sort of started to come back. And,
yeah, because I hadn't heard of it before until
yeah.
hearing about your company, and then of course Jason Bailey's book, which I have here as well, Fun City
Yes.
Cinema. I know that's it's a coincidence, right? That you both have the Fun City as the book.
It is a coincidence. And actually, we even though we didn't have our first release until 2 years ago, Fun City, the name, Fun City Editions, the corporate, the legal entity has existed for like 6 years, but it just took us a little while to actually get going. But yeah, totally a coincidence. But it did seem like at some point, Jason and I that we should collaborate. So yes, he's on the commentary track for Born to Win with his podcast partner Michael Hull, and they did a great job.
Oh, I agree.
Like, since we were doing a Fun City movie, and people are constantly confusing us, that it seemed like it would be good for us to to actually do something, officially collaborate. And yeah, he's in New York also. We've actually even in this COVID era, we have been able to meet up. Actually, we did a screening of Born to Win a couple months ago at the Nighthawk Cinema in Brooklyn, and Jason did a little intro before the show, and then we sold he sold his books, and we sold some Fun City discs after the show. So that was fun. But anyway, back to your original question. You asked me like about what we do as a company, and while we will release Fun City movies, we would be limiting ourselves if we restricted ourselves to only releasing Fun City movies. So we're really focusing on, in the most general sense, deeper cuts, cult movies, hidden gems, films. At this point, it wasn't really by design per se, but a lot of what we've been focusing on have been films from the like late 60s through the early 2000s. But essentially, I would say anything that's like 20 years or older is probably fair game, and not necessarily English language either. And we'll have more films in the future that are from more far-flung places. I think at this point we've got US and maybe Canada, Great Britain, France, but we'll have some more. But generally we're doing new restorations of films that have slipped through the cracks, films that are sort of maybe slightly outside of the canon, films that kind of that kind of have a place. Maybe they're a little odd or off in that they sort of occupy multiple genres, or they're just different. They're sort of maybe more than one thing at the same time, which makes them harder. Maybe has made them harder for people to sort of grasp or kind of figure out. Like our most recent release before, or the one after Born to Win and before Heartbreakers, was Coca-Cola Kid. This is a good example of that. It's like a movie that is made by a European art film, like a guy making very avant-garde films in Dusan Makavejev in the 70s, and then in the early 80s he sort of goes more into making some more commercially driven higher finance films like Coca-Cola Kid, which sort of like I said, it's one of those things where it's sort of doing two things at once. It's kind of like a more mainstream film, but with lots of really weird, very offbeat, left of center elements, which sort of makes it hard for people who want something a little more mainstream to grasp onto, and a little bit harder for people who are like, oh, I want something more like Sweet Movie or WR, which were Makavejev's earlier well-known films, which were like way further on the on the avant-garde side. So yeah, I don't know. It's sometimes I say it's hard for me to summarize, and I sometimes think, it's just easier, go to funcityeditions.com, and you know, kind of, you know, you can kind of maybe have an easier time sort of sussing out what I'm trying to suss out now. I'm not always the best pitch man.
No, I know what you mean. It's, I mean, Born to Win, you know, like it's a film about drug addiction, but it's not in the sense that when we think of drug addiction films as being extremely grim, extremely dark, you know, extremely dramatic. I mean, it has all that, but it also has this humor that seems to come like out of nowhere and unexpected. And so you can't really say it's a drama, you can't really say it's a comedy, so you can't really fit it into, or even like an addiction type film, which is what's so unique about it. So I know exactly what you mean. But I wanted to ask a little more about the company. But before that, I was curious. So how long have you worked in physical media? Because you used to work at Kino Lorber and various other places.
Yes. So my primary work experience in the film world, going back about 15 years before Fun City, was in theatrical booking. So working with theaters and film festivals and cinematics and art galleries, basically all independent
Okay.
kinds of venues to book art house films, classic films. Eventually kind of migrated mostly over to repertory reissues of classic titles, catalog titles. So I was working to book the films and sell the films. And prior to that, I had worked in film programming. So I kind of had been on both sides of that equation. I hadn't really worked officially in physical media, even though Kino Lorber has a very robust home media
Okay.
component. But I was sort of more unofficially, my friends, my colleagues who did that, I might whisper into their ear at one point or another to make suggestions, and you know, sometimes things that I would suggest would you know, would end up happening, but it wasn't really, that wasn't really my 9 to 5 gig. But I was always interested. I was always a, you know, someone who collected physical media. I mean, you could see my records behind me,
Yeah.
and yeah, so I was always interested in the physical package, and that sort of more the permanency of that, as
Mhm.
opposed to streaming, or you know, or even the, you know, theatrical experience. You know, the idea that you could, you know, go back and revisit and have a package, you know, something you can hold in your hand, and you know, you can add the, you know, extra features. And that's obviously a big thing, that, you know, a big part of what we do is we do want to have those contextual extra features, to sort of like the commentary tracks and the interviews with people if they're still around, things like that. So I always had a feel for it. I was always in that. I was like I was part of the market. I was like I was, you know, obviously I was a customer, but I, you know, how to have a, you know, having worked in film, also I had some, and being close to the, you know, close to acquisitions, and you know, the way the deals are structured, and how to find the rights and things like that. I mean, that's stuff I've been doing for many years, you know, as just part of all of my jobs, even when I wasn't working in physical media specifically. So, and all those things kind of led to where we're at now with Fun City.
And what interested you in starting your own label?
Well, I think it was just like something that was in the back of my mind, maybe more subconsciously, for a while. I think, like I said, having worked in programming, having worked in this on the distribution side, working with programmers, and then what I'm doing here with Fun City, they're all sort of forms of I hate the word. I mean, it's overused, but it's a way of. There's a similar. Everything here is a. I'm trying not to say it, but it's a. There's a cure. There is a curation um, there's a common thread there of all of these things involve, like I say, like programming, collecting. I've always been interested in I've always been interested in, I guess what the common thread would be is I've always been interested in introducing other people to things that I've found to be worthwhile films. It could be records too, it could be books, worthwhile things that maybe people don't know about, or just have been kind of overlooked. That's always been something I've been drawn to. So having a label like Fun City, is just like, it's a dream for me. It's that obviously perfect venue for that, and to be able to sort of do it in a way where it's not like I'm just making a list on my social media feeds or something like that, but actually there's a little more I have a little more stake. Obviously it's a little more high stakes, a little more something a little more meaningful, to be able to basically I can't stress how fortunate I feel to be able to sort of combine that that natural those natural passion, that natural interest that's a lifelong thing for me, and be able to put it into this business, and make it something that's, like I said, a little more has a little more permanence.
Mm-hmm. What was when you decided to do this? What was the first step? Because I know you partnered with Vinegar Syndrome, who's like a really well-known boutique label. So did you approach them first and pitch them on partnering, or what was the first thing you did?
The first thing I did was like establish the legal entity that is Fun City Editions, and that was like I said, like maybe like 4 years before we actually started having stuff come out. And it was just sort of it was something where I thought I might do something with Kino Lorber in a similar way, since I was working there already, and they obviously already had a lot of pre-existing relationships. It just didn't end up happening there, unfortunately, at the time. But fortunately, later on, the opportunity, just through my relationships with some of the people at Vinegar Syndrome and some mutual friends also in the business, was just able to the opportunity kind of fell into my lap to participate in some licensing deals with Vinegar Syndrome, and sort of piggyback on some larger deals. And so that's what happened with the initial releases that we had through that were licensed from MGM. So yeah, it was just it was like it was based on these sort of long-standing relationships that you have that are sort of partially partially social, and partially business. And so it worked out. I was in the right place at the right time.
I see. And when you decide to do a film like Born to Win, now I imagine the first thing there is to see if you could get the rights to actually restore it. Is that like, how does that process begin?
Yeah, well, so Born to Win is also a film that's in the MGM library. We already had done I'd already been involved in a previous deal with MGM, and those titles have already come out. It was in the first like 5 or 6 that we did. And so we did another deal with MGM, and Born to Win, I knew that was a film in their catalog, and so it's a matter of saying, hey, is this available? And then they say yes or no, and then you trade some numbers, and it's part of a much larger deal. I mean, there's it's basically like you can't really just say, I just want to license one movie from a company. It's got to be part of a larger deal. And it's, so when people say, oh, why don't you put out X, Y, and Z movies, and they're from like 3 different companies, it's like, well, first of all, I have to have a relationship with those companies. They have to be willing to license the film to me. I have to be able to meet their price. and it's a, and it's not just like you can kind of just go like to the grocery store and say I'm going to go, just pick whatever I want off the shelf. No matter, they don't have to all be from the same company or the same brand.
Right.
Obviously with the movies, it's a little, with these are much bigger ticket items. So
I see. I
so
see.
yeah, sometimes it's like, yeah, there's tons of movies that I would there's obviously tons of things that are wish list items that are, uh, maybe one day we'll get to do them, maybe not, but we just have to work. We're working. You kind of work within, within the bounds of what's available. Obviously, where you got to know where to go, and then people have to be, the rights holder has to be willing to make a deal, and then obviously you need to have some good quality materials from which to do a good restoration.
Right.
That's sort of what, something that that we, and obviously Vinegar Syndrome, that's a big part of the brand identity is, we're releasing new restorations of these older films. You can't be recycling like older outdated masters and things like that. So you need Born to Win is with the studio, so it's a situation where they have they did have reasonable materials, and we were able to work off an IP, and we have good, really skilled people that can do the scanning and the color grading and the restoration and all that. And so yeah, so that's how Born to Win, but then again, obviously also it has to fit. It also has to sort of, I feel like it fits with our, what we're doing in
Right. Of course.
the sense of the catalog, in the sense of the types of films, and those types of things, the characteristics of the films in our catalog. And Born to Win, obviously, I feel like has things that are connected to other films that we've done.
Right.
Like I said,
Absolutely, it does.
we
Yeah.
obviously have a very, as I say, it's a looser,
Yeah.
more loosey goosey brand identity in that way, and that we're not strictly. It'd be much easier if we were like shot on video horror or something like
Right.
that.
Right.
Something very kind of specific. Our
I
thing,
see.
our thing is a little less tangible. It's a little bit.
Mhm.
It's also still changing. It's fluid,
Right. And
But yeah,
something that's really long interested me with restorations. Now, I mean, in this case, Ivan Passer has just recently passed away.
yeah,
If you don't have either the DOP or the director, how do they, like, I'm talking from someone who has no idea. If they're
right,
watching these old prints that have obviously literally are decaying,
right.
how do they really know how to make it look as close to it did when it came out? Or
It's a lot of it's a combination of things. Yeah, sometimes the thing is, sometimes you have the director, the DP around, and sometimes they have a really good memory of what they
right.
want, how they want it to look, or what it quote unquote should look like. Sometimes they don't remember it. Sometimes they want to
Oh,
change it. Right? You got a lot
right.
of directors out there still, that are still around, who repeatedly change the look of their films, change
Yes.
the cuts. We know the names of lots of these filmmakers,
Right.
but so it's like it's very subjective. And also,
Mm.
like, there's so many factors that when the when these films that were shot on film, and in the celluloid era, and when they were color timed at labs, they were, oftentimes they were making prints and rush schedules and mass quantities, and oftentimes the release prints at the time didn't reflect what the filmmakers wanted. And that's sometimes how nowadays filmmakers with digital tools, they say, oh, now I can do it how I really wanted to. So
I
it's sort of
see.
like, well, what was correct, how you saw it in
Ah, I see.
1971, and maybe it was a shitty lab, and
Hmm.
maybe there was, maybe someone there made a choice, a creative choice, like a technician in the lab, that director wouldn't have done. And then now it's sort of like, there's also guesswork involved, you know. I mean, so it's very, you could see like a movie. Well, Born to Win is not a great example because it's been released because it's public domain and been released in so many shitty
Yeah.
bootleggy versions. There's not really a lot of actual official releases of that film. But if, like you say, looked at one of our other films that we've done, like let's just
Jeremy,
say,
for example.
what
I know
that?
you did. Jeremy was one.
Sure, like Jeremy. Yeah, I mean, Jeremy's another odd one because it's a 16 millimeter film blown up to 35. But yeah, I mean, you could look at you could look at multiple prints. You could look at multiple, you know, you could look at multiple release prints. You could look at VHS version. You could look at a DVD version, a Laserdisc version. You know, you could look at like multiple Blu-ray version, and they might all look different.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I mean, they will. I mean, beyond the, you know, beyond the actual, like, you know, clarity of the image, and obviously there's going to be an uptick in detail and quality as, you know, you get up to Blu-ray, but just in, like, in terms of like the color, you know,
Right.
the look of the film. And so, yeah, so we will look at earlier versions, earlier home video versions of films that we're working on, just as like reference, but also sometimes the element we're working from, which oftentimes we're working from an IP. So there's already there's already some more direction in terms of, like, there's already some, you know, some choices that have been made in terms of the color. So the color, the person doing the color grading, you know, has a already a good sense of this is a, you know, we're working with people that have done this a lot, so they're very experienced. They can sometimes tell, or they can often tell where the, you know, where the IP, where the element is kind of leading them in terms of you know, in terms of the way they could go with the color. I mean, you can go in opposite directions.
Right.
I'm not really explaining it well, but it's sort of like,
No, I know what you mean. Yeah,
you
it's
kind of have
very
a, you know,
complicated.
there are clues, there are things
Right.
that an experienced person, much more than me, much
Right.
more than I am, because I'm not a restorationist. I don't have that
Right. I
actual
see.
hands-on experience. But
Right.
people that do, you know, and this is something we're working on right now with, you know, one of our upcoming titles. It's kind of like, okay, we have a Blu-ray, you know, we have a previous version of the movie, and it looks a lot different than our grade right now. And
It's interesting.
but we don't know, they might not have been working from the same element that we're working from, you know, and our, you know, and we could try to, like, basically to match that look of the previous Blu-ray of the film. Our restorationist would sort of have to go in a kind of unnatural way based on the element that they're working with. It would, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, again, they might someone on that, whoever did that previous master may have had some directive to go with a very specific kind of look that might not be true to the element they were working from, or, you know, so yeah, anyway, there is no 100% it's supposed to be this way or it's supposed to be that way.
I see.
And like I say, even when you have the people alive,
right,
to look at it, their memories are not, nobody's memories are 100%, especially you're talking about a movie that's 50 years old.
Yeah.
And there's just so many there's, you know, so many factors along the way. There's been when these movies first came out, what I'm saying is there were so many different parties, so many different actors involved, not actors on screen, but, you know, people that were involved in how that movie went from camera to theater.
Of course,
and
yeah.
So many different people made choices, and so yeah, I have to say, this is totally subjectively speaking, but having looked at the 35 print of Born to Win a couple months ago in Brooklyn, right away, I thought, and again, I'm biased, but I was like, wow, I think our Blu-ray color timing, like the color looks so much more vibrant on our master. Now, again, I don't know what that print was made from. Is that print?
Right. I see.
That, that print may be may have been made from a lesser source, or it, may have it may be that it may have been made from from a source a generation away from what we worked with. I'm not sure. So,
I see. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't realize it was actually such a complicated subjective process. The reason I asked is because I would, if I'm looking at the back of a Blu-ray or DVD, and I have occasionally noticed like, oh, the director actually supervised it, or the DOP, or then I'm like, oh, so what happens when they're not there? But I actually hadn't thought of it. That person may not remember, like, 50 years ago, even though like that comes to mind is Elaine May, Mikey and Nikki, like apparently she supervised it, but how, even that was like 40, almost 50 years ago as well, right? So
right.
How well could she remember everything? It's hard to say.
Right. And supervising may have meant she looked at something that was basically finished and then said, yeah, okay, or
yeah,
you know
or
what I
change
mean?
this or that.
Yeah, maybe. So yeah, it's it's all. The other thing is that some filmmakers are filmmakers that are, that came up and were trained with, can shoot the film themselves. And there's other filmmakers that came from directing theater and
that's true.
Never picked up a camera, and never and would have, everything would be, in terms of that side of things, would be in the hands of like the camera department, the DP, So yeah, it's all to say that whenever anyone says this is, it's supposed to be this way, or it's supposed to be that way, I mean, this doesn't really exist. So yeah, we're excavating here, So
that's interesting. Yeah, I actually didn't. That's an eye opener for me, because I've always been sort of long interested in restoration, and I have found that people I've talked to, like, there isn't one answer. There's no perfect answer. It's such a collaborative process, right? So
yes, which, I mean, that's film too, right?
Yeah, exactly.
There's just so many hands,
so many working elements. When you say, you go to MGM and you trade numbers and things like that. So did you also have to raise funds yourself for Fun City, or is that or is connected with Vinegar Syndrome sort of where the budgets come in? Like, how does
no, I'm not work? No, I'm not underwritten by Vinegar Syndrome or anything like that. No. I mean, it's no, I'm bringing the funds.
Okay.
To keep us afloat.
Right. And was that challenging to raise fund? Like, how do you go about, getting a budget to pitch MGM and things like that?
Oh, well, I mean, yeah, I mean, I brought some seed money to, start the company, and luckily things are in profit. Like, things are, no, we're not getting, we're not like swimming in it. We're not, we don't have like, this is not a business to really get rich in, at least not yet for us. But yeah, we're sort of just staying afloat, and that's kind of like with luck. The good thing about being going in on a deal with another company like Vinegar Syndrome, and they are a much bigger company than us. I'm just one person. Is you combine resources. And I can be in these deals because they have a much bigger piece of that pie. So yeah, so it's just a matter of, does the rights holder, does the licensor accept my offers for the particular films that I interested in, and go from there. But yeah, I mean, it's obviously it's not monopoly money. Yeah.
Right.
So it has to make some financial sense. And obviously we're spending a lot of money on the all the other things, the restoration and all the extra features and stuff like that. You know, it's yeah, it's not tribual, you know.
I see.
Just say that. Yeah. And
Right.
also like this is a niche, business. Obviously the physical media is like a niche of a niche, especially
Right.
for something like Born to Win. So yeah, so it's and when you only have home video, if it's only home video rights that you're, you know, you're contracted by the you know, that you have from the rights holder, well, it limits the you know, how much you can monetize
I see. I
all
see.
those things that you did, like the new master, all that kind of stuff. So
So when you initially began the company, what did you then have to, like, on the very first movie you did you then have to sort of like find funds for it, or how did it launch? Just because your first one was Alphabet City, right?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, like I say, I brought money that you know, I brought funds to it myself
Oh, okay, great.
to
Yeah.
start it, you know.
Okay. So you had some money
So
that you could invest,
yeah,
basically.
it's not like
Okay.
yeah, it's not like, again, like I said, because I can't just get one movie at a time. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
I had to pick, like, you know, a handful of movies. So yeah, I had to have some,
I
you
see.
know, some startup, yeah, some startup
I
capital.
see.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when I saw that you're a one man, you know, that it's, you know, you're a one man band so far, I'm like, oh my god, how do you do that? That's
Yeah.
got to be a huge undertaking. So I really admire that you've
Oh,
gone all
oh,
the way with this and had so much
thank you.
success. Um,
Yeah.
I
Thank you.
I was
It's a
curious.
little scary at first.
Yeah. Oh, I bet. Yeah. Like, you know, absolutely. You know, this is something that really interests me is, you know, I've talked to collectors, and here we are in the age of streaming where movies are available, you know, at our fingertips. And, you
Yeah.
know, I have a lot of people on my show who either work in the industry and some who don't, who are just, you know, big cinephiles. And you know, I noticed their walls, like it's like a little video store of just like pure Blu-rays, DVDs, and I'm fascinated by the people who are collectors. And I was curious because I know that you had mentioned you're a collector. Of course, you've worked in the industry for a number of years. What do you
Yeah.
think hooks people to get into collecting? What is the like sort of emotional? I know it's different for everybody, but is there
Yeah.
something generally that you've noticed that really hooks people to, especially now when I imagine because of streaming, it must be so much more difficult. Or maybe it's not. I don't, it seems to be more popular than ever.
Well, it does. Yeah. Well, I'll say this in general. It does seem that since the middle point of the pandemic, maybe, you know, like summer, I would say like sometime in 2021, maybe in like early to mid 2021, it does seem like um, collecting, there's a huge influx of new collectors in physical media in general, whether it be records or movies or baseball cards, comic books, or
Right.
whatever.
Right.
All of these little collector niches have seen huge upticks in new collectors, which is obviously good for us in who are in the you know, business on the other side of it. You know, I know that a lot of companies had some, you know, well-known companies had very good years in like 2020 because people
Yeah.
had this disposable income that they couldn't spend outside of their houses anymore. So they were bringing new entertainment in.
Right.
And so, but that doesn't really answer the question you had about like, well, what is it that makes people want to collect? I
Mm-hmm.
can't really say that I don't really know per se if there's one answer to that or what that would be. I know that for myself, it was like something that I just, it wasn't something I came to like later in life. It wasn't like, oh, I saw a movie that really transformed me, and I was like, oh, I want to own it and have like, and then start and do that for other movies. For me, it was like, I know from from like the earliest age, I did have an impulse to want to have a souvenir. So like I know from like my dad would take me to go to basketball games when I was very young, and maybe I went to the circus, and they sold a program, and I like wanted to have the program,
Right.
and nobody, I don't know why that is. That again, it was like that was something that was just hardwired into me, I think. So that's just me though. Other people, it does probably happen, come later in life. But I had that, like from as young as I can remember. So I don't know. What about you?
Yeah. Well, I certainly wouldn't consider myself a collector. Like there are certain movies that I just, love so much that I'm like, I got to get it. Like if it's on Criterion or Kino or now Fun City, like this is a film again that I saw in 2003, and like when waiting for the day to arrive, like I have a decent collection, but I certainly don't keep my eyes on what's coming out from my favorite labels like Criterion and get every single one. I know some people do. And so I've always been interested now, especially now because of streaming, how this has survived. And not only has it survived, it's truly thrived. But I imagine, of course, like they're like mini film schools in a way. You got the packaging, you've got the featurettes, you've got the restoration. You can't get that on a streamer, and of course, the streamers also take the movies down. I'm sure with even the Criterion channel, they take down a bunch of titles every month, and I mean, sure enough, they add as many. But
they have limited licenses. They have license terms, just like we have license terms for the Blu-ray you're holding. Like that's going to go out of print. In all likelihood at some point.
Exactly. So once you have it, you have it for life.
But yes, in that case, you have it. With the streaming service, you don't know if you're going to be able to access something that you sort of bought on the streaming service. If they take the movie down, do you get to still access the movie somewhere? I don't know.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it's a number of factors, but at the same time, some people have said to me, it's part addiction. I mean, I'm sure it's a healthy addiction. It's not that there are worse there are worse addictions. But like there's so much great value in these. I mean, I even love the essay inside. I just want to get the writer's name here. Justin La Liberty. I mean, I love these in all of any Blu-ray or DVD. I always go right to them. I imagine
that's great. A lot of people don't, so I'm glad. I'm glad that you will pick up the booklet and actually read the essay. So a lot of times even the reviews just say, "Oh, there's a booklet with an essay," and they just don't they don't comment on it further.
I feel guilty if I don't read it. It's like buying a new book and leaving it on a shelf. I'm like, I didn't have the whole experience.
Well, it's not like it's that long either. It's 1,500 words maybe.
No, it's not too long, but it's really, really nice. And again, the fantastic commentary by Jason Bailey and Michael Hull. There were a few things, a number of things they pointed out that I hadn't thought of, and I probably have seen this movie once a year in the last 19 years, and I was curious if any of these things popped out to you. But one thing that they said was, I'm just gonna get my notes up here, that everyone who gets close to JJ, they end up like dying or ruined. You see Karen Black gets arrested at the end. His wife is already hooked and into prostitution with Vivian, and she's an addict. And then of course you see Billy, shoots up with him, which was actually JJ's drugs, and ends up dying, in an elevator.
Yeah.
Not that I wouldn't say that this is all of his fault, but it almost, again, it goes to the irony of the Born to Win. But it seems that everyone who gets close to him, who really loves him and who he really loves, ends up you know, dying or in jail, which was something that just hadn't. I mean, I saw those things, but I didn't actually connect it in that way. That was a great. I don't know if that was something that you had thought of about the story.
Yeah, maybe, maybe not consciously per se, or not. I mean, I didn't obviously I didn't write an essay on it, or record a commentary. So yeah, no, I mean, I think that speaks to the I mean, that's sort of like almost like a he's that's kind of like what happens when if you're in the throes of addiction. Everyone
Of
around
course.
you, right, loved ones and friends or whatever, get affected by it in some way. I think um in the movie, of course, maybe it's a little over dramatized.
Right.
Everything, horrible things happen, like you said, to everyone
Mm.
that gets near JJ. I mean, and that's the movies and things just being a little more
Yeah.
elevated
Heightened.
and
Yeah.
yeah, a little heightened and larger than life. Yeah,
Right.
but yeah, it's kind of portraying the worst, the sort of collateral damage of his addiction.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Absolutely. And obviously, I saw, and it's also somewhat, it's humorous, the fact that this guy was a stylist, a hairstylist,
Yeah,
and one thing that they had mentioned was that, and I hadn't really thought this through, was the fact that he is not someone from the streets. It wasn't like I mean, you don't know a lot about his background, but you don't get
right,
the impression that he was someone from like a truly broken home where he was living in abandoned buildings and he
right,
fell
right,
into
right. No,
addiction
no,
as a
you
teenager.
certainly, yeah, you certainly get the sense that he came from a more, that he had, he was from a higher station in life. Yeah,
Yeah,
he was a
yeah,
he was
yeah.
like
He
a
has
high
children.
end
He had a
hairstylist. Yeah,
career, and he was married, and so why this happened, no one. It doesn't really matter. I mean, you don't need to spell it out, but that was something
I
that
mean,
had
again, I think it's the addiction.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly. He tried it, let's say, for whatever reason, and then
I
it
mean,
went from there. But that's true, because you see a lot of drug addiction films, particularly at this time.
yeah,
A lot of them are mostly people from the streets. Well, then again, if you look at something like Panic in Needle Park, you don't
right,
really know where Bobby, who Pacino played, comes from, but you know that his girlfriend was not from it, and then of course going with
right,
him.
right,
So
right.
so it kind
It's
of,
also, it's like a most cautionary tales, I feel like, are
yeah,
uh, you know, in films, TV, they usually are showing people that are come from, quote unquote, good homes, and who are not from the streets, like, not, people that are more middle class.
right.
It shows, and this is like an example of that, where it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. If you get
Yes, that's
hooked,
true.
you're going to go to the same place. The only thing, the difference would be that if you come from a more privileged background, you might have more support and getting out of that addiction, or you may have
Mhm.
more
That's that's
resources
a,
to
that's a good point.
resources
Yeah,
to get out of it.
yeah,
Like, for instance, in this movie, he's when Jay asks his wife, played by Paula Prentiss, like, where the kids are, she says they're with my mom in
yeah,
California.
yeah.
I
And he
mean,
looks really
someone
like,
else might have been, oh, they're in foster care. I don't know where they are,
right. That's
So
a good point.
luckily they had, someone like a close family member like that was willing and able to take the kids.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. But that was something else I hadn't really thought through in the past. And I love, Karen Black, this relationship between George Segal as JJ and Karen Black. And I actually reviewed the film last year, with I had a co-host originally, and he and I talked about the film. And one
Oh,
thing that we that was a discovery that I was, was something that I thought of as like, why is she attracted to this guy? Like, like she is not from this world. And yet she knows he's an addict, and yet she's, falling in love with him. But she seems to be attracted to danger, like the thrills. And that was something that popped out to me, but something that Jason and Michael had pointed out was the fact that, she kind of sees through his charm. Well, she does see through his charm and finds it amusing. You see him off the top with Billy when they rob the vault, and he's so charming with that older woman, and she buys into it, and that really connected his other interactions with Karen, because she doesn't buy any of his kind of like charms, but yet she finds it so appealing at the same time. But
I think she finds him like someone that she can maybe save in some way. Like she sees something like obviously you're right, like she sees through his bullshit, but she falls for him, or she wouldn't be giving so much of herself and putting herself out there. I mean, like she does try to turn him around.
Yes.
And that's probably the biggest tragedy in the movie, right? Like, her ending is pretty.
Oh God,
it's heartbreaking.
When they plant the drugs in her.
Because there's so many shit. There's so many shitty people. Like almost everyone in the movie is pretty crappy.
The cops are probably the worst.
And like I think like her her intentions like seem to be pretty altruistic. Like she's like genuinely really has love for him, and it seems like that, and that's and on the other side of it, right? Like it's kind of like, well, what's his bigger love, her or the next fix? And I mean, a lot of that's not really even a choice for him,
obviously. I really that scene where they leave town, because I love how it suddenly abruptly flips, because he doesn't seem to acknowledge his addiction. He doesn't seem to see himself as an addict, is my impression anyways, because he blames everything else around him for his addiction. It's New York, it's the city, if I can only get out. And then of course they do get out, and it's all happy and everything, and then suddenly you even see the music starts to change, and he's looking out at the ocean. You're like, and she's calling out to him, what do you want? And of course this is when he starts to really he's jonesing for the drugs, right? And so they run right back, and that's again the true tragedy and trappings of his addiction. But I also, one thing that Jason and Michael pointed out was that scene when she's counting how many people she's been with on her fingers, and then he says, am I the last one on your pinky? And then she goes, no, it's like the second last one. And then he walks, and he was about to walk out, and again, like she wasn't going to sort of like be controlled by him. At the same time, like his charm was a sense of control to get what he wanted. And there was an element of pushback from her, but at the same time she did it in such a playful way, but then at the same time brings him back to New York when he needs the drugs, right? Instead of saying, no, I'm not going to take you back. So that, because she felt sorry for him and she didn't know what to do with him, that's sort of up to the audience, right? So that also was something I hadn't really thought of that before. Which was an interesting discovery. And the soundtrack in this film, William S. Fisher, this is phenomenal. I mean, I can listen to those tunes all day. I mean, it's such great 70s New York music. I absolutely love it.
Well, he's still alive, and there was a record.
I searched him last night.
Yeah, there was a record released. He released before this movie came out, and some of the music that's in the movie is on the record. He was like a session, mostly playing on other records, a lot of jazz
Right.
records, and yeah, it's like one of those that it's a great time for. Uh, there's like a lot of great music at that time, which is sort of combining, which has elements of jazz and uh, folk and psychedelic
Yeah.
rock, and that's
Yeah.
kind of that was kind of where he was what he was trafficking in. Yeah, it's great. I don't think his music was used in, I don't know if it was used in any other movies, but yeah, I mean
Oh, it's
it
phenomenal.
works. Yeah, it works beautifully in the movie.
And the little song that Karen Black sings, I last night read that she wrote that apparently on the beach. It's
Yeah, it's
called
beautiful, and
Ballad
it's
in
beautiful.
C. Yeah.
Yeah,
And she sings.
I
Yeah.
think it's yeah, no, it's really speaks to her talent. I mean, because
Oh
it's like,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
feel like there's a couple other movies, like, I can't think of them right now off the top of my head, but there have been some other movies where it's like, oh wow, someone act like the actor who's singing the song, that's actually a song they wrote, and it's like in the
Yeah.
credits. Yeah, I think in the Wanderers, there's something similar where there's a song. I don't know if you've seen that movie, but
Oh yeah.
there's
Yeah.
a song called
I love that movie.
yeah, there's a song called Stranger Girl, which you think is like a vintage doo-wop song that all of the guys sing in one scene, and it's beautiful. And it's actually written by one of the
Oh
actors.
wow, I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
Jim Youngs. So it's a similar kind of thing. So yeah, you get some actors that maybe weren't known for having some music ability, but actually, I mean, they obviously do, and they
Right.
just didn't, maybe their careers just didn't really, go that way in a, full-time kind of way.
Right. Yeah, but they were able to utilize them for certain films. Another thing about this film is just, we've touched on it, but the performances are, phenomenal. Not just, I initially wanted to see this because getting into like De Niro when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
And then I walked away thinking about George Segal and Karen Black and being like, wow, I discovered, I mean,
Yeah,
I knew who
yeah,
they were, but
right.
wanting to see more and more of their movies. But not just them, Hector Elizondo, I mean, he's very well known. And Jay Fletcher, I mean, I've never seen him in, this guy is incredible.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know,
He's
is
great.
he passed away? I don't know if you know anything about him or if you
No, I
tried.
don't really know too much about him.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, he doesn't have a ton of credits.
no,
And he is in some other Ivan Passer films, but like in small roles. I think he shows up later in Cutter's Way, like as a security guard or
right.
something. That's not really much. But yeah, he's so good in that
He's
part.
amazing. I mean, when he
And
dies on the elevator, like
yeah,
just the
yeah,
way his arms are moving as the doors kept hitting him. I mean,
oh yeah,
he's
oh yeah.
dead. Like
Yeah, yeah.
it's like holy
No,
shit.
that's actually, yeah, that's a really lasting image.
Oh
Yeah.
my god. Yeah, I know you got it
Yeah,
on the
no.
back cover here, which was a good.
Yes,
Oh,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
there we
They got
go.
it. We got
Which
it.
is
We got it on there. Just so you know, it's not all. It's certainly not all fun and games. But like you said before, that is one of the things that makes this movie stand out, and is also, I would say, more common for that period in filmmaking, that change in tones,
absolutely.
that this movie has so much, uh, there's a lot of sweetness in it. There's a lot of in the darkness, obviously, like overall it's kind of a dark, sad story, and obviously there was just tons of that stuff made in the new Hollywood, tons of movies with like impossibly impossible to do now, unhappy endings and ambiguity. So this
Yeah.
movie has a lot of that, but then
Oh
it
yeah.
also has a lot of humor, a lot
Oh
of shit
yeah.
where you're laughing
Oh,
out
it's
loud.
so funny.
Um,
Not
and
everything, but there are certain scenes, and I used to think that some of the humor was um didn't really work organically, but I've changed my feelings over time. When I reviewed it last year, my co-host at the time, because I used to think that when he got the pink, when they kidnap him and he gets the pink nightgown on, and then goes into the suit store and steals the blazer. I
yeah,
always felt that was sort of put on, but my friend actually reminded me of an occasion where he and I here in Toronto were approached by an addict and she was wearing a ballerina skirt, outfit, and we were like, why, but it's sort of like, where, who knows how she got that. Like, it might have been cold and needed something, right? You do see addicts, even here in Toronto, there are certain areas that are where a lot of addicts roam, and if you look at the way they're dressed, sometimes you do. I mean, not that I'm laughing at them, because they may need certain things just for warmth, right? But that there is something darkly funny about that, and the fact, and when you see, it's not so unusual to see a guy as an addict in a nightgown, right? And in his case,
but it's also New York at that time too. It's also sort of this idea that anything goes, and you see it, especially when you watch a lot of movies from that time period, New York movies. You start to see there's actually a lot of funny parallels. There's other scenes in other movies where like similar things happen. And I found this when I was compiling all this footage for the video series I talked about before. I would find similar things happening in different movies.
Do you remember any offhand?
Yeah, I'll give you an example. Like, so in the movie Where's Papa?
Yeah.
Right. There's a scene where
also George Segal.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, George Segal was like, he is one of the quintessential Fun City actors. He's a New York guy. And that's another thing. You watch the movie, like, especially if you're from New York or you've lived in New York for a while, you're just from the area. Like, there's just certain people, this, like, when you can tell when someone's actually really from the area, there's a certain edge, obviously, and there's a certain kind of knowledge that comes off. Like, a guy like George Segal radiates that. It has to do with like cultural references and just sort of like the way. So this movie has a lot of that. You can tell that so many of the people are really New Yorkers. And anyway, but that's like one of the fun things to see, and you see it a lot in the 70s movies when people were really local, and it's allowed to come through in these movies. It's sort of like not scrubbed clean for Hollywood, kind of like, and a lot of the people are real. Some of those people are not even actors. A guy like Irving Selbst, who plays the gangster type character. I'm forgetting his name right now.
Oh yes,
but that's the guy who strips George Segal naked, and makes.
He's in a few films.
Yeah, right. Time. But he wasn't actually an actor. He was like a guy who like sold suits or something like.
Jason
but he was
that.
But he was like a larger. Yeah, and he's in a bunch of movies from that time. Yeah. Anyway, so so I mentioned Where's Papa. So there's a scene in Where's Papa where Ron Liebman is walking through the park and he gets mugged, and the guys who mug him make him take his clothes off. So he's got to like run back to his apartment naked. There's another movie, coincidentally directed by Yvonne Passer, called Law and Disorder, where a guy is mugged and stripped naked and ends up in the elevator like of his apartment house, just like Ron Liebman, naked. And they're different movies, but there's a commonality in there, that they're sort of they're these absurd very specifically New York comedies, and it has to be that kind of shit happened to people in real life in New York. Like, you didn't get stabbed, you didn't get killed, you didn't get punched, but they took your clothes off. Right. And like
they humiliated you.
Yeah, they humiliated you. Anyway, but there's tons of that kind of stuff. There's so I would cut those kind of, I would edit those types of moments together.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's because it's just funny, because it just, those are things that really speak to sort of the, like I said, the anything goes kind of nature of the city at that time. And so this movie is definitely in that. It's in that same world where there's a lot of kooky stuff happening. Like just in the opening scene with, like, you mentioned, like, when they're trying to steal the safe
the safe,
club. And at the same time, one of the guys, I guess it's the Jay Fletcher character, is like carrying like this like ceramic like elephant or something that he won or took from the arcade they were in the earlier scene. It's just sort of like absurd, like this carrying around this you know what I mean? That red ceramic.
You know what?
Elephant.
I to see. That's the thing. I must have missed
It's just like little details like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
you know. But yeah. Also, just the conversation that George Segal has with the woman about, you know,
Oh, I love that.
You should try an enema.
An enema, yeah.
Yeah.
That's so funny. I never.
Also, that's a very New York Jewish. Like a lot of the comedy is very not only New York but very New York Jewish comedy.
Right. That's funny because I never even noticed Billy holding anything because I'm always looking at because George is sort of the focal point there, and the woman.
Well, we remember in the earlier scene when he picks up Billy, he's in that arcade, and I think he wins it as a prize. I think
that's
carrying as the prize that he won.
Oh, the opening when they're introducing.
Yeah. Billy's playing that game, which I'm not sure what it is. Yeah.
Oh my God. See, that's the thing about a movie like this, right?
It's like stuff that's not even, you know, it's not really spelled. It's sort of just like background detail. Like nobody, because the music is playing, it's like it's something you see over the credits. He just happens to be carrying it.
The opening credits. Do you remember the first time you saw this?
I probably saw it. Trying to think, I might have seen it actually at some point when I was making the video series.
Okay.
Yeah, so maybe it might have been a decade ago. I don't remember seeing it earlier because it was always available. It was one of those movies you would see packaged as basically a bootleg, one of those Poverty Row labels with a completely unrelated picture of Robert De Niro on the cover.
There's so many of them.
Because it was public domain, or it was treated as such, and so people,
one of them they literally use his headshot, like it's not even him in a movie.
Which is completely common. That's completely what they do what they would do on those fly by night budget labels. They would not license. They would just be releasing stuff that's public domain, and then they slap a picture on of a completely unrelated movie because it's like we're trying to sell it as a Robert De Niro.
As a De Niro, yeah. I mean, and he's in maybe three or four scenes, right? Like it's such a small, but they make it look like he's a star.
Yeah,
that other movie he did just before this called it was originally called Samsung, I believe, and then it was released as The Swap. And that's a terrible movie. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
Yeah.
It's so bad.
I actually haven't, but it's also like another one where it's never been really. The only version that is available, I believe, is like the second cut of that movie, the second version, which I guess is The Swap.
Yeah.
The original version is not available anymore. It's never been available basically like in a like sort of like Born to Win, not really having been available until our Blu-ray in a official disc, at least here in this country. It wasn't really available in a non bootleg version. So
I haven't seen it.
I haven't seen it.
I used to see it around town, or even in Toronto, in little bins or DVD bins, and the Swap and Born to Win as a double feature. But I
used to see it back in VHS bins because I was buying VHS, and I remember it in the in the 90s. They had the same budget line stuff like that, and you would just say, "Oh, this isn't a real movie," or I'm not gonna. I mean, the quality would be terrible too. So.
But I saw it on TV, and then I just taped it at the time, so I always had it on VHS for the last 20 years until of course now getting it on Blu-ray. But this is a real treasure. So anyone who, even if you don't know the film, or if you know it, highly recommend getting this Blu-ray, because it's a wonderful, wonderful film. I actually haven't seen. I was looking at the ones that you have released, and I must admit I haven't seen any of them. I've heard of some of them.
Oh, yeah?
I instantly was intrigued, because I'm like, well, if you like Born to Win, then I got to see all the,
Yeah, I mean, I think off the top of my head, that our first movie, it's a different movie, different type of movie, but it's a New York movie, a little bit more recent vintage, is Alphabet City.
Oh yeah.
So you're looking for another kind of vintage New York fun city movie. Alphabet City kind of fits that bill in terms of showing you in New York that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, that was another one I hadn't heard of it. But your packages are so incredible. I know that you've said in other interviews, like that's so important because
Yeah,
obviously this is the first thing they see. So even if they don't know the movie, it's like,
yeah,
whoa,
yeah,
that
yeah.
looks, and I must say the artwork and all of them is phenomenal. Like, because I hadn't seen, like I said, I hadn't heard of Coca-Cola Kid, but the artwork is like, it's
Oh,
fantastic. Like you just
thank
want to
you.
get it. You want to
Thank
just
you. I'm
pick it up,
glad you liked it. Yeah, I mean, you're never going to please everyone. Some people, sometimes they think the new artwork looks terrible, and luckily
Right.
we include some vintage artwork so they can
Yeah.
flip the cover around or something if they don't want to, display the new art. But
Right.
I'm glad you dig it,
Oh
and
no, for
sometimes that's
sure.
how that helps get some new, you catch some eyeballs that way. You get some new viewers. You got to reel them in however you can.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And I know that you've said, that films that you want to release movies also that are that are relevant that you can market. So what, or you could say, well, Born to Win is like such and such that maybe
Right,
more
right,
people would
right.
be familiar with. So
Yeah.
what was your pitch for a movie like Born to Win?
Well, I'd say the New York part is a big pitch. People are
Yeah.
definitely really into New York from that time. You see a lot of shows that are set in New York at that time. And this is a movie that actually is New York from that time. So that has a lot of cultural currency now. Old New York, Fun City,
Right.
New
Of
York.
course. Of course.
And then you have uh, the story, the energy of the story, the very, like I said, again, that very specifically New York edge and humor and sensibility, and the sort of white knuckle aspects of the movie's character is kind of like world is kind of closing in on him, and that is this is a movie that has been not surprisingly shouted out by Josh and Benny Safdie as a big
Yeah.
influence for them,
Yeah. I
and you
love
can
those
see it,
guys.
yeah, and you can see it in
Oh
their
yeah.
films
Oh
for
yeah, for
sure.
sure.
They're
For
they're
sure.
they are
Uncut Gems comes to mind, definitely.
sure Uncut Gems, even Good Time,
Yeah.
um,
Daddy Long Legs, even.
Heaven knows what the film before.
Yeah.
Their films do of current contemporary films. They do really capture New York. They capture parts of New York that do hark back to
Oh, for sure.
that New York from this era, from the 60s and 70s,
For
and
sure.
yeah, and they're students of it, obviously. I mean, they are, they're native New Yorkers, so
Yeah.
that goes a long way
Yeah.
as well. So yeah, having being able to say, yeah, Uncut Gems and Born to Win is a great double feature. I mean, yeah, obviously that could go a long way. A lot of people
Oh,
obviously like
yeah.
and know those films, those more recent films, and then this is a film which is, even the filmmakers are saying,
Oh, definitely.
it's an influence for us. So that goes a long way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the music and George Segal and Karen Black and De Niro, like
Yeah.
these are all actors that have cult followings. I mean, and so yeah, all that stuff, and the fact that it wasn't available in a decent version.
Yeah.
It's been treated very shabbily over the years. So also that is another reason to
Right.
we can stake out some territory there that nobody has before. So
Yeah.
that
Well,
goes.
that's certainly a winning, like that's a winning pitch. You got everything there, right? Dude, not only the cast, New York, the
Yeah,
Safdies, which are popular now. So,
yeah,
oh,
yeah,
certainly.
and yeah, and I think that uh that you are seeing, not just in the Safdies, but I feel like there's other, especially on, I think more on TV maybe than in feature films, that there is an interest in this sort of a lot what this movie is doing in terms of like bringing this comedy, bringing these different tones together, bringing this kind of comedy, this
Right.
sometimes cringy, embarrassing comedy, and then like some really like dark,
Yes.
very, very dramatic, very sad material
Yeah.
together. I feel like that is kind of, more, sort of in vogue, or you see it in you are seeing that in new films, and definitely I think in TV as well.
Would
You know,
the one that comes to mind is like I didn't see the Deuce. I think it was called the Deuce.
The
With
Deuce. Oh
James
yeah,
Dean.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, and that
that
was
was
like,
New York
that was
and 70s.
specifically, yeah, very New York. Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think I saw a little bit of it, but I can't recall if it had a humorous, dramatic
There was
vibe. But
there, yeah, there was some humor. There was some humor in that too. Yeah,
yeah,
I didn't finish watching the whole thing, but yeah. Yeah, and there's definitely, like, I feel like there's just so many shows out there. I'm
there's so
I'm
much.
horribly behind, but
So am I. Yeah,
yeah,
I'm such
I
a
do
film
feel,
guy that
yeah.
I rarely even think to go TV. you
Yeah,
know.
well, it's nice to be able, with a movie like this, you can zip in and zip out in less than 2 hours,
Exactly.
and I do really think that that is a beautiful thing. That's something that, for me makes it a superior form.
Mm. Oh,
I'm
I agree.
I'm more drawn to something that makes, begins and ends in like a 2 hour time frame. To me, that's
Mhm.
like a great, that's not easy to do. And it's just sort of like, for me, I've said this a million times. I'm sure I've said it on other interviews, but less is more for me. I personally like it that when we watch this movie, we don't have all the background details
Yeah,
on all these characters.
totally
I
agree.
don't need to see George Segal's home life before.
Right.
I don't need to see what happens, specifically what happens to him
Yeah.
after the
Yeah.
movie. The thing with the long form TV is that it's an excuse to show everything.
Everything.
And I
Yeah.
think it just kind of like, my issue with it is that I think the viewers become conditioned to that. Like,
Yeah.
I want to know everything. I don't
Yeah.
want to have anything left up in the air. And what I love about a movie like this is you just getting a slice of this guy's
Exactly.
life. But there's enough
Exactly.
there. There's enough there for you to sort of have a pretty good idea of where he came from, and have a reasonable idea of where he's going. Um,
Well, absolutely.
without it saying he died,
Yeah.
like 2 weeks later.
Exactly.
uh,
Exactly. No, I totally agree, because it's a film that involves the audience, because if it doesn't feed you everything, then you and I can now speculate about what happened, and why did this guy
right,
fall into,
right,
and it's not that we're nailing down a static answer, it's that there are possibilities, right? And that is
yeah.
involving us, instead of saying, okay, he's doing this because this happened, and now this a
Yeah.
what A B and
And then
C.
like, why are you going to watch it again? You're not going to watch it again if
Exactly.
that's the
Yeah,
case.
there's nothing more
Whereas
to
Born to Win,
discover.
you could revisit, because Born to Win, you might have a different, from the time you've watched it so many times over the years, uh, you're you're it's open enough and open-ended enough, or ambiguous enough, that, and also complex enough. Like, these characters are not,
Yeah,
they're shades, they're shaded, they're not, all bad or all good, not all of them
exactly.
anyway. So it makes for different experiences when you view it at different points in your life. I feel like it's that's to me the form of, or the sign of a movie that's doing something right. You could watch it and have
Oh, absolutely.
a totally different feeling about it,
Yeah.
when you watch it years apart.
Yes.
So.
No, I totally agree. Where's the best place for people to follow you on social media, or your website, I
Sure.
imagine?
Yeah, so funcityeditions.com. Thankfully, nobody had that domain before. And it has links to all of our social media platforms, our accounts. I think we're at Fun City Edition on Twitter, no S on the end. but I think everything else is at Fun City Editions, Instagram, Facebook. You can buy our product. You can buy the discs from our site. It'll take you to Vinegar Syndrome, or you can go to vinegarsyndrome.com and go to the partner labels page, and you can find, we have our own page there as well. But also our discs are available, you know, on all of the, you know, other major online retailers, and sometimes they're actually in stores, which is a rarer thing these days, but still kind of cool, you know.
Yeah.
You can actually go out in the real world, to
pick it off a shelf.
store, pick it off a shelf, inspect it, see if the slipcover, you know, packaging isn't dented up or anything. Yeah.
Right. Fantastic. Well, I'll leave the links in the description box below where you can follow Fun City Editions and Jonathan and check out his website. And, you know, I highly recommend Born to Win, but I'd recommend all of the films because they all look really, really incredible. So
thank you so much, Robert.
No, my pleasure. Well, I hope
you have to let me know. You have to let me know what you see if you check anything else.
Oh, I will. Yeah, certainly. Certainly.
Yeah.
Well,
no pressure though, because I know there's tons of other stuff out there, and we're, you know, so.
No pressure at all. And, you know, hopefully I can have you back on sometime down the road and discuss another release. So thanks for your time. I hope I didn't take up too much of your time. So thanks so much.
No, not at all. This is fun. Always.
Thank you so much, everyone, for watching and or listening. If you are currently listening to my YouTube video podcast on the audio version of the channel and you've run out of episodes to listen to, head over to the YouTube channel where every single episode that I have ever recorded can be found. Go to youtube.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies. I also want to thank all of my members on Patreon. If you're interested in becoming a member of my Patreon, head over to the link patreon.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies. Patreon is bonus content that I create month in and month out, and it is based on polls that I put out at the beginning of every single month, which as a member, you will have access to vote on. So if you like my work and you're interested in supporting me over on Patreon, head over to the link for full details. You can also leave a donation directly to my YouTube channel. If you look underneath the video box, you will see the like, dislike, comment buttons. Click on a tab there that says thanks. And from there, you can leave a donation if you choose to. And lastly, if this is your first time here, please consider subscribing to my YouTube video podcast. It is absolutely free to do so by pressing the Robert Bellissimo at the movies logo. You will see it floating above my head in the top left corner to your top left in just a second. Just click on that and then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release one of my new episodes or when I go live. Thank you so much, everyone. I will see you in the next episode.